Hello, humans. Hello, humans. Okay, what's going on? There we go. Okay, hello, humans. It's been a while. All right, so I don't have much time. I've got timed issues here in terms of things I must do, and we're going to keep track of our time too. Okay, cool. And we're doing stuff. Yeah, boy. Okay, so our old reports had all kinds of temporal markers for the time that we're at right now. And this is where we have the big crash of Western civilization. This crash of Western civilization is basically the end of the world as we knew it, and we're not going back. Now, we've already recognized that that's occurred since 2019 or 2020 with the COVID thing, right? And so we're not going back. There is no return to that old form of life. We're now in this new normal, and the new normal is going to be very disruptive, and it's going to be even more disrupted and disruptive to us emotionally going forward here from this point on, because we're in that point of our reality when the central bank itself and the system that the central bank has set up is under attack, okay? And this is a good thing. The central bank is all of the central banks on the whole planet are owned by the Rothschilds, all right? The Rothschilds. Rothschilds. So it's a crime family, all right? So these are Khazarians. These are part of the Khazarian mafia, very big in the Khazarian mafia, and they own and control the central banking system throughout the whole planet. And that system is crashing now. They don't have a cover story like a world war with nukes flying around. That's what they're trying to gin up as rapidly as they can in the Ukraine. Now, in the Ukraine, it's not going to get any worse than it is now. The Russians are not invading. This is an incursion. This is a policing action. This policing action has very, very specific goals. It has to clear out the biolabs, which are a threat to the Russian people and to everybody else. It's to capture the scientists and the information that was held in those biolabs, and when they clear out the biolabs and capture them, they have to be very careful that they don't disturb things such that they become a problem, the biolab becomes a problem. So you can't just go and blow the shit out of it, right? And then also they have to get rid of all of these Nazis. Now, these Nazis are not like German guys, okay? Even in World War II, the worst of the worst were Ukrainian Nazis. This is because the whole Nazi idea is comes from the Khazarian mafia, and it goes way back, like into the 1800s, back to the period of time that the Illuminati, in the form of the Freemasons, had Albert Pike doing this design for the 3 world wars, and then the pandemic, and then the global government, and the elimination of white people. All of this was within their structure, within the work that they gave to Albert Pike. Albert Pike was something of a twisted genius as a military guy, as a general fellow. Anyway, so we have here the Rothschilds as part of the Khazarian mafia their structure, the central banking structure itself is under attack, okay? It's under attack as it is crumbling. So it's under attack by exposure. Not only weird shit like this here, not only internet nutters, but actual facts coming out as to how twisted and evil and corrupt and so on all of these fuckers are, especially since Ukraine was this like central hub of all of their corruption. And so we have sort of a lumpy Ukraine here, and we find out that Putin is not invading, he's not bombing the shit, he's not destroying infrastructure, he's not out killing civilians. The Ukrainians themselves bombed that theater. to blame it on Putin. They're trying to gin up another nuclear war kind of a thing. We see that Putin is only attacking those areas where there are biolabs that had been situated around the edge of Ukraine as it faced into Russia. And these guys are so twisted, they've been sending in deliberately infected birds, trying to kill all of these birds in Russia by sending in birds that had bird flu, just releasing the flocks and basically making them fly towards Russia. You know, it's like some other kind of CIA shit like we had here in this country, where the CIA was trying to get birds to drop bombs on Castro or some damn thing, some weird thing like that. This is back in the 50s. Anyway, though, and the CIA is Khazarian mafia as well. Let's not forget. Okay, they're part of this deep state. Okay, so the central bank is the deep state. The deep state only exists because, and that's an equivalency, not an equals, but the deep state only exists because the central bank can bribe it. Okay, now the central bank's ability to bribe is reduced by the amount of purchasing power you actually have in each of your monies, okay? And so way back in 1913, they could bribe people with just like a $1. And it would go a long way because the $1 had a lot of purchasing power. Now, we only have a little tiny bit of purchasing power in, like, say, $20. And it's getting worse because, you know, the cost of fuel, right? So if you give somebody a $20 bribe, it gives him 4 gallons of gas. Not much of a bribe. So so you need a lot of $20. So the central bank has been inflating their own currency. Bear in mind, the central bank never, ever, ever, ever fights inflation. They never fight inflation because that is their product. That's the only thing the central bank can produce. Also, so now bear in mind that our central bank and all other central banks are a scam. So the Rothschilds, in the form of the Khazarian mafia, has blackmailed, killed, or threatened politicians to get the legal right to produce the dollars that you use and to charge you interest for the use of them. So right off the bat, when you get $1 here, you owe them $1.02, because that 2 cents is their inflation. That's their fee for producing that dollar and letting you use it. And it's like, well, wait a second, it's a USA dollar, what the fuck, you know? And so, yeah, you see, it's a scam. And that these guys twisted the politicians way back in, and they've done it 3 times in this country, and it's been kicked out 3 times. Andrew Jackson killed the second bank. We're in the third bank that was allowed by Woodrow Wilson, whose daughter was threatened. They killed they blew up the Titanic and the Titanic, and all of these kind of things were done to cause the conditions that allowed the Rothschilds to get their central bank back in the United States. Because there's something about the central bank. If you have this right legally granted to you by the scum politicians, guess what else you get? You get the right to collect this interest by tax. So you get to tax the populace in order to collect your interest. And over time, the amount of inflation, the amount of your fees that you put on here grows. Because guess what happens? In order for us guys to pay off this $1.02, we need to borrow another 2 cents. But we end up borrowing more than that. We end up borrowing another $1 and or another couple of dollars, right? Let's just say that we borrowed $3. Well, when we borrow those $3 and we pay back this $1.02, we owe, because of inflation rising, and this is a hypothetical example, and because of purchasing power falling, as we continue to use this system and borrow $3 on $3, we don't owe $3.06. So it's not just simply $3.06 that we owe, it's $3.10 because of the effective flow upward of inflation and downward of purchasing power of the units that we're actually borrowing. Over time, we get to the point where we arrive where we're at now, where 99.9% or cents out of every dollar, purchasing power is gone. Totally gone. So you got very little purchasing power compared to 1913. Yet you're still expected to pay the interest rates that are nominally and notionally accumulating. In order to clear this system, in order to get the Rothschilds, who are also in charge of the World Economic Forum, and Klaus, our favorite Dr. Evil, Klaus the Schwab, in order to get them their great reset, in which all of us schlubs will own nothing but we'll be jolly schlubs, they had to have some event, right? They needed a world war, they needed nukes or something, so that we wouldn't all figure out, oh hey, it's the fucking central banks and these Khazarian mafia assholes that are doing all this shit to us with this weird Babylonian money magic. Go and look it up, right? Anyway, so we're at the point right now where the central bank is going tits up. It's done. They have no purchasing power left in the stuff they're putting out. They're not ever going to fight inflation. The minute they really try by putting on these rising interest rates, look what happens to everything else. Hyperinflation, Bitcoin, hyperinflation, Ethereum, hyperinflation meat, hyperinflation fuel, whoosh, 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 whoosh. And the converse is true, right? As your fiat nominal notional numerics on your fiat rise, the value of your politicians fall. So look at how Biden is taking it up the ass on this shit. Everybody's giving him all kinds of hell, because it's finally dawning on him. Hey, something ain't right. So, this is where we're at now. What's going to happen is not what you're being told, okay? So you got people out there, this is the reason I'm having to do this, is because other people are giving you the wrong idea. And I'm not saying that these guys are idiots or anything like that, right? I'd come on out and say that if I thought that was the case. But what I'm saying is that they don't grasp where we're at and what's going to happen. So they're telling you that when this whole system implodes, which it is now, that, okay, so there's basically two groups out there, all right? So there's the group of the Charlie Ward numbnuts, Simon Parks, Charlie Ward, these kind of people. And they're saying, oh, don't worry, you schlubs. No worries at all. We got the QFS, the quantum financial system that will know automatically whenever you want to do anything, and if you didn't want to do that, it won't let it be done. And all this automatic happens without you having to do shit. And, this external savior is going to come and rescue you, and you're going to get bazillions of dollars, and you're going to go, but there's a catch, you got to go and do these humanitarian things. And it's kind of like, well, wait a second, people. If everybody's in Gesara and everybody's in Nasara, nobody needs to do any humanitarian stuff because everybody's got gazillions of dollars, which tells you, gazillions of dollars where everybody has them, nobody has anything because there's no value there because scarcity provides value to humans. Okay, now, here's what's going to happen. All right, so that's group one, is the Charlie Ward numbnuts crowd. Okay, so hang on. So we got the Charlie Ward group. These terrible things. Anyway, we got the Charlie Ward group here saying QFS, right? Which is a bunch of horseshit. That ain't going to happen. You've got another group out there that's basically touting a new form of global governance, all right, which is basically a new form of a central bank system. So it's the new central bank. And curiously, people like Russell Brand are pimping this. So I think maybe he's like controlled opposition or something. Their idea is that we would have a central bank we would all agree to as long as the Rothschilds run it. So, as long as the Khazarian mafia runs the bank, they'll agree to allow us to agree to it. And so that isn't going to happen either. But you've got a third group out there at the moment that's saying like massive poverty planet-wide. This is the end of life as we know it, right? Because they're saying this because the reason is they recognize that the central bank is in the kill box and it's dying and we won't have the central banks anymore, and somehow they think that when the central bank goes we will have massive poverty, and this is not the case. Even if we did not have cryptos, when the central bank goes, guess what also goes? It's the interest scam that goes. You go into some form of sound money and you don't end up with hyperinflation. You don't end up with inflation eating away and making you into debt slaves. You don't have a debt-based system, and things are a hell of a lot better. We used to have this in the United States prior to 1913. And it was very excellent. In such systems, you don't have inflation. If, say, you have a gold-based system, right? The only thing that can inflate that is the discovery, mining, refining, and distribution of more gold, all of which involves real actions, material, and so on, not magical digits. So nobody has to get involved in debt in order to do that kind of thing. And so you don't have the impact on the system that you do when you flood the system with the product of the central bank, which itself is inflation. So the central bank, in spite of anything they'll tell you, they are not ever going to fight inflation. They're going to die right now on deflation. Deflation is where there is demand destruction. We have demand destruction now. Shit's getting too expensive to buy, so you don't have a demand for it. If all of a sudden soda is, $20 2 liters, well, you're not buying soda much, right? And so you don't have much demand for it. There's other forms of demand destruction that are also deflationary that are occurring right at this moment, including this shit with the attacks in the Ukraine. Okay, so now here's the thing. So we're not going into poverty because we're going to have this stuff that all of us will agree on is sound, meaning stable or solid. I don't want you to think it means singing or, that kind of shit, right? It's not relating to sound. It's relating to solid money. This solid money is going to be based on gold, silver, scarcity of those, scarcity of Bitcoin, and effective cryptos like Ethereum, and will be based on the production of USA dollars, not Federal Reserve, not licensed by the Congress through the Federal Reserve to come back to you with interest on them dollars. Not that kind of thing. So we'll actually get a new form of, probably we'll call them constitutionals, right? Or something, right? I'm just saying that we'll call them something else so that we know we're not dealing with the Federal Reserve notes that have gotten us to this point. Now, the central bank, the Khazarian mafia, they're not going to get their way. So they're not going to have these great resets. So what's going to happen is we're not going to get the poverty that these other individuals out in the truther community are saying, because these guys are under maybe they're doing it for clickbait, but a lot of them are under the idea that if the central bank goes away, the financial system goes away. And that is true. But the financial system is something we don't want, because the financial system is all that interest-based debt slavery. What we want is the underlying economic system that supports that, from which these people have been parasitizing all of that blood and sweat and tears that they took in the form of interest that made us all debt slaves. Now, we're not going to go into poverty, but it's not going to be Gesara, Nisara, instant riches or any of that kind of shit, okay? It's going to be a long, hard struggle, very much like what the Russians did as they came out of the Soviet Union, because these same fuckers captured Russia and turned it into the Soviet Union and destroyed everything and sucked all the wealth out of it. The same Rothschild central banks, all of that are the enemies of the Russians going back to 1917 are our enemies that also struck us in 1913. And so we're going to go through the same kind of things that the Russians did. It'll take us slightly less time because there's more of us. We're a bit more prepared for it. There's people planning for this. But nonetheless, it's going to take years to sort all this shit out. So bear in mind, we will have a very irregular economy emerging as the central bank system collapses. That irregular economy will take some number of years for all of us to sort out and rise through. So don't count on QFS or any of that horse shit that Charlie Ward and his people are peddling. If you do anything like that, if you count on any of that stuff, you will make your life poorer because you will not be taking advantage of opportunities you've got now to get shit that you need now while you can get it, okay? So this is the point we're at, is that we're coming into the hard part. So now what you have to do is, if you're in the United States, if you're in Britain, which is tied to us by the dollar, if you're in France, if you're in Australia, if you're in New Zealand, we're all underneath the Khazarian mafia central banks, which are dying. We all have to think of ourselves as living in the last days of East Germany, right? As the communist East German system collapsed. We're in those last days. The wall has not come down, and we still have our Khazarian master central banks in place, but not for long. Okay, as that happens, we won't have an instant recourse of a sound money. It'll take us some time to get to the point where we have our constitutional dollars. So we do have some functioning forms of solid money now in the form of gold, silver, these kind of things as well. And even, as I say, fuel, meat, milk, this kind of a deal, right? Because these have real value, as well as the cryptocurrencies. Now, so what's going to happen, what I expect to happen, okay, so this is, in my opinion, based on having read through all of the data and stuff and been doing all this shit for years, what's going to happen is that we're going to go through this period, we won't go into poverty because the SOC has set up a really cool thing here, okay? They set up this, they had Trump sign this deal whereby anybody that's an enemy of the United States that's been fucking with us, anybody that's been trying to take over our media, anybody that's been trying to take over our institutions, anybody that's been involved in child trafficking, all of that, we can seize your assets when we convict you, right? We can just take it all. Trump signs it, good as gold. Okay, so this means that, once it's proven that Dominion machines did this, once they are proven convicted, you can't appeal this part, the executive order part. So even if you could appeal the conviction, it doesn't matter. Once you're convicted, you can get all your assets seized. So once that happens, the Dominion Voting Machine Company becomes the assets of the United States if they so decide to seize them, right? And they can do with them whatever they want. This is also true of basically all of the money that is being seized now by Russia on behalf of themselves in Ukraine. Okay, so that's where Hillary Clinton and all these fuckers have stashed all their money. Bear in mind, Ukraine, the country, was the biggest, quote, donor to Hillary Clinton's Clinton Global Initiative to fuck everybody, right? And so Ukraine was the biggest donor. It's this big circuitous thing where they're raping the taxpayer of the United States, they give it to Ukraine, gets deposited in Ukrainian banks, circulates up a bit, and then the Ukrainian government gets it to the, or donors give it to the Global Clinton Initiative. And so she makes out by funneling them $14 billion and she gets 2 out of it, right? That sort of thing. Don't hold me to the numbers. Anyway, it's just a description, hypothetical. Anyway, so those kind of things, all of that money can be seized now. All of the property can be seized. All the assets can be seized. So, hey, guess what? Bill Gates has just bought up huge amounts of farmland, right? Well, if Bill Gates gets convicted for fucking around and being part of COVID-19, hey, all that farmland's now nationalized because the United States government, in whatever form we reconstitute it, this is post-Biden, can seize it, and off we go, right? So we can turn things very, very, very rapidly. We won't go into the kind of poverty that is being described as this 100+ years of the central banking system. Bear in mind, they've been planning this shit for like several hundred years. And they've tried it 3 times in the United States history. They've tried it in other countries successfully, all of these different kinds of things, right? And so you can just follow this trail of misery that goes back centuries from these people. Anyway, so we know how the playbook is. We know how they run it. They're stupid. The Rothschilds, by the way, are inbreeders. All right. So in order to concentrate the wealth in the family, the patriarch of the family way the hell back when, Bauer, who then set everybody off to be Rothschilds by having the Merkaba, red Merkaba up over his door, a red shield, Rothschild in German. He said, do the inbreeding, concentrate the money. Well, it dulls the mind as well. This is why these people are clever. They're manipulative, but they're not very smart. And so their system is coming unglued at the moment. As that happens, there will be these seizures. How the distribution goes from the seizures of that stuff flowing back into an effective economy, which is the flow. Okay, it's not the ownership of stuff, it's the flow. So it doesn't do any good like we see the Midas kind of things, right? It doesn't do you any good to own all the gold in the world if you're not flowing it out to people to get goods. What good is it? You can't eat it, etc., right? And so it is the flow of all of these energy in the form of the currency, the current, that is the energy current, the water current, the emotional current, the goods current between humans that matters, not the temporary repository in the moment of whoever is supporting that flow along the way. So smart people understand that money is a tool, it is not a goal. The Khazarian mafia are not smart people. So they think of it as a goal, and that's why they want to own it all. And when it's all concentrated in their hands, well, there's an old French saying, when there is the rich and everybody else, we eat the rich. So, you know, now is the time that we're consuming the central banks who have hoarded all this money for over 100 years here in the United States. And so this is the end of them. But it's the end of the system globally. It's not, so this is, none of this shit, none of the devolution, none of that stuff is about the 4-year election. None of it is about 2020, although that matters. We have to have the acknowledgement. We've got to dig into that, blah, 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 blah. Not discounting that at all, but I'm just saying that this is but a strategic avenue in the overall larger strategy against the blood-sucking parasites of the Khazarian mafia. Okay, so now as we seize those assets, there may indeed be distributions, but they won't be recompensed. So there's stories floating out there. You're going to get back all the interest you've ever paid. I don't think any of that's kind of like going to happen, guys. There are other ways that things can be done that don't involve government doling shit out to you. But in any event, so we're not going to get the horrific decades of poverty, but we will be poorer temporarily as we slide from debt-based money into solid money. The sooner we can get sound money flowing through the economy, the more rapidly we get picked up and start moving. And then it forms a solid base from which we keep going. And here's the beauty of this, okay? We don't know in our lives what it is like to live with sound money. All of the kids born since 1971 have no idea. They've always lived in a fiat money system that was unbound to anything other than the threat to hassle oil, right? It was the petrodollar, which is really the bomb dollar or the explosion dollar or the army dollar, however you want to think about it, because that was all it was the threat of war if you tried to buy oil in any other currency. And that propped the whole thing up. So the Khazarian mafia used the United States military to destroy countries, to invade, to do policing actions, which weren't policing actions. They were designed to cut the countries in half and so on and so on. Putin is doing a real policing action. We'll see the difference. So there's going to be a lot of information coming on out. We're not going to go down the poverty level. The way that everybody's saying, we will be poorer temporarily as we go through this. The more rapidly we can get our shit together and get the sound money, the shorter the time is that we will all be poorer. So we going to have to learn to cooperate to come out of this in an effective fashion. But there are things you can do now while we have a few bit of time remaining to improve your personal circumstances, but don't count on any Charlie Ward kind of QFS horseshit. And by the way, that's just another form of central bank ownership of the individual because it owns everything, all the assets. So, Charlie Ward is a pimp for the central banks. So just watch out for these guys, okay? Anyway, it won't go down that way. It's going to be quite remarkable. This is a great time to be alive. You all signed up for this, whether you remember it or not, when you took this life, when you accepted this life. Now is the time we got to grit our teeth and get to it, because now we're getting into the real work aspect of it. Speaking of which, I have real work I have to go and get done. And so once again, it might be, I think it's been like 13 or 14 days, might be 15, 20, 30 days before I can get around to this again. They granted us our permit to do our road. We can't really do the bridge until the dry part, so we can't get into that until the hydrology is correct around the stream. That'll be late in June, but there's all kinds of staging stuff we can get done. Not that it means I'm building a house there. We're doing this for the harvest of red alder for the furniture industry. Anyway, though, so I've got a lot of work, some of which is going to involve getting involved with the road project out in on the other property. And tons of stuff here. So anyway, so these will be few and far between. Sort of get used to it and use the time effectively to get your head right around how things are going to start laying out and what you can do about it. Okay, guys. Yeah, there we go. Okay, stay woo and stay centered on things. Hello, humans. Hello, humans. Back again. Okay, so you can't see it, but it says up there that this is the 4th of March, 2022. We've got a weird kind of a thing going on here. Anyway, so this is the dojo. We're going to talk about some source code. Dojo is a place where the way is practiced. And so Do means the way in Japanese, the way to enlightenment. And so you would have Budo, which is the way to enlightenment through contention with yourself. And you have Aikido, which is the way to enlightenment through mind, body, spirit harmony. Again, within the framework of the contention. You have Judo, which is a refinement of Jiu-Jitsu down to the point where it is a pathway to enlightenment, and it's called the soft way. Ju meaning is taken as soft in that connotation. And so this is the Budo, is the overall category, the overall classification, so to speak, of a bunch of different things that we could call martial arts. And you practice your martial art in the dojo, and you train to be better at it, to be more effective, to obtain your goals, etc. You also understand it philosophically. As part of this, you have to understand it from an identity basis, from an intellectual basis, from a hormonal or spiritual or ki basis, and you pursue all of these things within this one setting of the dojo. Even if that dojo is ephemeral, metaphorical, or illusionary, it does not matter. It is the set and setting that is produced by the dojo that is the contributory aspect. It adds to the process. So in other words, one may meditate anywhere at any time, but you will find that there is an appreciation of a quality of meditation done under formal circumstances that is lacking when done under informal circumstances. And thus that quality may become appreciated and may become advantageous, even to the point of being desirable, and so one may desire to participate in formal meditation for the exact quality that is provided by the formality, the social aspect of it, the combined key of all the people meditating together in a same setting, etc. Right? There is a place, a set aspect of it, so set and setting in that sense, that refines the process that you're doing there. So you can go on out and practice your martial arts anywhere. I go down on the beach and I can do my rolls and do kata and all of that. But it's different if I go and do it within that formal setting, put on the gi and all of these kind of things. And there is a quality that is imbued in that practice from the place. And so to a certain extent, everyone is sensitive to aspects of set and setting in all experiences. It's not just limited to psychedelics. And set and setting can be and should be qualities that are integral to and integrated into the practice, right? So if you're going to have a dojo, there would be specific reasons, all right? So I'll tell you this up front. There would be specific reasons to do this, really, but basically, no person running a dojo is going to put their dojo right next to a garbage pit, okay? They're just not going to do it. They're not going to put it right next to a landfill for a lot of different reasons. However, if you truly were on the path of enlightenment and you accepted only very senior students, there are dojos like that where there's only 4 or 5 people that train together, and that's about it, just limited to this small group. Those kind of places do indeed sometimes select specifically disadvantageous settings in order to heighten the set quality of that experience. That's like the top dog level of set and setting nuance, right? That you obtain more from meditating over an open sewer than you'll ever obtain from meditating in any other place that you may encounter. So, you know, the best meditating facility, the best spa, all of these kind of places will never, ever, ever take your meditation as far as going out and deliberately creating a set and setting to meditate next to an open sewer. It's just the way that there are aspects there that it's just the way it works. Anyway, so here we are to talk about Budo and war, because we're in this period of war. And so here it is, the 4th of March, and as I had been predicting some months back, at the third weekend of February, and as we moved into March, we'd get more of the war language coming on out. Well, this is quite predictable. My software picks it up, but it's also quite predictable because we knew that it would involve Russia, right? And the Russians, they don't do shit prior to 1st of March. And why is this? Because in Russia, the 1st of March is taken as the first day of spring. We do it on the equinox here out in the West, but in Russia they use the 1st of March. Now Russia, of course, is a big damn place, and it stretches a long way across the planet. And so you could have increasingly winter-like conditions as you go towards Siberia, even in this advanced spring day of the 4th of March. But it is predictable that the Russians don't do more than skirmishes in initiating things until the first part of spring, right? When they are the active person. They're like any other warfare. So it was stupid of Hitler to invade Russia when he did, because if he got bogged down, which he did, he would end up trying to invade this part of Russia as the winter is setting in, and it was the terrible conditions of Stalingrad, etc., right? That's an aspect of war that we need to understand at a realistic level. As humans here now, you have to understand. Most of us are not in the military. Most of the people that are killed by weapons in war, that is to say they're shot or they're blown up by a tank or whatever, most of those individuals will be in the military. But most people who die in war are not in the military. Most people who die in wars are civilians. Most people that die in wars, therefore, as civilians, they are not dying usually from being shot or blown up. They're usually, most of the civilians that die in war die from lack of food, lack of medical care, lack of electricity, lack of transportation, a lack of something, right? And so your local sewer plant gets blown up. Maybe 1 or 2 people get killed, okay? So that's the little tiny bit of the population that is civilian that gets killed by a bomb or a bullet, all right? But because that local sewer plant gets blown up, you have an outbreak of cholera throughout the entire region, and instead of just the 1 or 2 people that were killed in the explosion, the civilians that were killed at the sewer plant when the place was blown up, you now have perhaps 100,000 people that die, many of them children, because of the conditions of cholera, because you don't have the effective ability to have hygiene. So it is the lack of an effective hygiene system that causes this sort of death. And so you have a food processing plant, it gets blown up, the people that are working there get injured and blown up, but what really is the fall-on effect is that you have starvation throughout the region. So in 1914, there was a revolution in Russia. 1914. 3 years later, the Khazarians out of Ukraine, where am I at here? Out of the Ukraine, the Khazarian mafia out of the Ukraine took over the Russian Revolution through several of their agents, including Vladimir Lenin. Okay, so when that happened the revolution happened in 1914. For 3 years, they held the Tsar and his family captive, and we're in the process of rebuilding the Federation of Russia. At that time, this is 1914. From 1914 to 1917, even in the midst of that revolution, even in the midst of the Russian Revolution, the very, very heart of it all going down, Russia had the most effective agriculture system on this planet. Russia fed most of Western Europe and a great deal of Africa and Asia. Russia was the breadbasket for the fucking planet. It was the most efficient production system we've ever seen for food. It has never been equaled on a calorie in to calorie out basis, okay? And in 1917, the Khazarian mafia got really, really, really pissed, and they moved out of Ukraine. They moved out of Ukraine, and they went into Russia, and they called themselves Bolsheviks, and they took over the Russian Revolution, and they destroyed that food system, and all of the people, 2 million plus people on the outskirts, and 12 million people in the greater Khazarian area, Ukraine and so on, and Kazakhstan and all of this. 12 million people in there died from starvation. It was twice the claimed death rate for people killed by Hitler. And you don't ever hear anybody talking about it because it was the Khazarian mafia, the Ukrainians, taking over and doing their shit here that caused this. Here's something you need to know about the Khazarians, okay? The Khazarian Empire extended from this area here, went through, let me get a marker here, see if this will work. Okay, so this is the former abroad, nah, that's not going to do it. Anyway, so we have here, there we go, better. We have a Khazarian Empire that at one point went over, there we go, into the northern part of India. And we know this, that in spite of the formalities that said that the old Khazarian Empire ended in this area here, we know it extended over as far as this boundary here, because there are persistent historical not myths. They do have some aspects of legend, but they're inculcated into our expressions in all of our languages. So even in Chinese, so in China, there is this, the cultural work for the Chinese is called The Journey to the West. Really, it's a cool book. Jackie Chan's made several movies about the central characters in that book. all Westerners should read it if you want to understand the Chinese mind. It doesn't aid you understanding the CCP and those people, but it does aid you in understanding the cultural milieu in which China has arisen to the modern state here. Okay, but even in Journey to the West, there are aspects to this little story here. The Chinese had this phrase, this expression, that you had to watch out for the name stealers. We have that same expression arising from Europe in 800 AD. That was when it was written down in 800 AD. It was written down in Europe. Watch out for the name stealers, don't have anything to do with them, all of this kind of stuff. You're just going to get into trouble. And the name stealers here that are being referenced, and the name stealers referenced in China that goes back even further than that 800 AD. Now, this was written down in 800 AD. They may have had it for 1,000 years before that as part of the heritage in the Oralinda, the Codex Oralinda. This is where I'm referencing it, right? But it's written down in other areas, in other literature. I think even Chaucer wrote had a little bit of an allusion to it. But in any event, so it goes back some period of time. And these are the name stealers, okay? Because the Khazarians were this group. Now in China, they described it as if you go far enough west, you will run into these people that will invite you into their village as a traveler. They will feed you. You will have a nice drink. You have a great night. They put you in the best bed in the inn, and then they kill you. Okay? Then they kill you. They take all of your possessions and they steal your name. Now while you're having dinner with them and they're getting you drunk and stuff and they're drugging you up, they were known to really use drugs and be black magic kind of people, right? A lot of black magic is associated with the ability to know how certain drugs will affect the mind, et cetera, and you can introduce them into food. So mostly a lot of magic per se is dealing with drug states for the mind. That aside, the Chinese had the understanding that if you went there, they would get your story. They would steal your name and your story. And so the Khazarians were known by the Chinese, and so, but it was known on both sides. So if you were over here and you were going to try and do business with the Chinese and you went through there, you might run into one of these groups of the Khazarians that would kill you after learning everything they could about you. They would steal your story, then they would go to China, pretend to be you, make the deal, and then go back, and the deal never happened. So they're fucking both sides, really. That was the thing, right? These were truly evil people. Now, both sides of the trade equation understood that there were nasty people, and in the Codex Oralinda they're described as being to the east, and the Chinese are describing them as being to the west. Aha! Anyway, so here we are in our current war. All right, and so in our Budo at the moment, we're discussing the active war that's ongoing, but it's not really a war. They're trying to make it a war in the United States, Britain, France, all these places that are controlled by the Khazarian mafia, right? Politically, because that's what they've done. They've stolen lots of names and they've inculcated themselves all over the fucking planet as a hidden control mechanism. Now, so all right, so it gets really tricky, and you have to be careful about all of this because you'll get not only lost in the weeds of all of it. The history is fascinating, but you have to be careful because you'll fall into traps that have been set by the Khazarians. All right, so the Khazarians were a nomadic people that are descended from the Mongols that interbred with people and had a particular phenotype. Now, this particular phenotype, with this clan of the Khazarians, was in a real bind at one point because they were trapped between the Byzantine Empire, which was also the Holy Roman Empire, and they were trapped between Turks in the rising Ottoman Turkey Empire. And they had a big problem. They couldn't go and deal with the Turks without fighting with the Holy Roman Empire. They couldn't deal with the Holy Roman Empire without fighting with the Turks, so they were squeezed. So they decided to claim that they were Jews, and so they couldn't be Christian, they couldn't be Muslim, but they wouldn't be fucked with by either of them. But the fact is that the clan here was not descended from Shem through Judah, right? I mean, it's not descended from that line biblically. So these people at that time were 3%, 4% of a larger population in this region in here that was related to them by clan. So they were related to the Germans, the Poles, etc., because they'd been interbreeding for some period of time. This population in here decided that they were going to be Jewish, and within their understanding of Judaism, these people devised I guess we could say it was a scheme, a plot, a plan, etc., that spread a particular understanding through not only through Judaism, but through Christianity. It impacted Christianity because of what books were left out of the Bible, and because these people had control over King James and the people that were doing King James Bible, all of this kind of stuff. These people had control over a lot of that. So they have altered history, philosophy, viewpoints, all of these things in order to protect themselves, because they were the name stealers. They were going to steal names real big and go on and promulgate it to the point where we're here now. And so we're at war now, and we see Putin invading and starting a great World War III and everything by invading Ukraine. And that's a bunch of bullshit. It's a bunch of horseshit. Okay? I actually think now that I was inaccurate about Xi, and Xi will be participating in this as well. And I think that they're going to invade Taiwan. But what's going on is the eradication of the biolabs that are controlled by the Khazarian mafia. And by that we also include Fauci, Biden, all of the fuckers in the United States who are also controlled by the Khazarian mafia. And we note that they all have huge bank accounts here. And look at how Zelensky, the head of Ukraine as a nation, has got this big, huge $34 million villa over here in Florida. So what's he doing? Planning on bugging out when it gets too cold there? Anyway, it's all interconnected, right? And so we're entering a period of war here. We're in a period of war now. We've been in a period of war all of my life, since 1963 in the assassination of Kennedy. And so we're in a period of war here that's developing, and as I had forecast months back, the language is bursting out. Now, our war language is going to be tainted by the other side because they're trying to gin it up as a nation-state war. Oh, evil Russians. And that's not it. Now we've got a case here that is really bizarre for the mainstream media, for the powers that be, because you've got a lot of people in the United States saying, yay, Putin, yay, Putin. And he's supposed to be the enemy according to our powers that be. And so this would be the equivalent of a bunch of people here in the United States after the bombing and everything had actually started saying, yay Hitler, right? In the 1940s. You just wouldn't see that happening. Here we're not coalescing the way that the powers that be want around this idea that Putin is the bad guy, that there's this World War III and so on, because so many of us know what the fuck is going on, and we're awake to the history and the problems that have been caused by these other fuckers here in Khazarian. They've just got to go. Okay, so we've got to get rid of all of these things, all these people. Now, here's something to understand. In my opinion, Judaism had been taken over. Okay, they were the first group that was infiltrated by the bug, and for a lot of reasons having to do with the nature of a philosophical trait within the source code for Judaism, okay? And so this is where we get into this issue of source code. I'm of the opinion, because I bought a set here of the Talmud, and I've read as much of that thing as I could possibly plow through, and there are parts of it that are truly disgusting, okay? To see aspects of pedophilia ritualized, okay, codified. So it is a source code at that stage, and I won't go into that at the moment. All right, but in any event, within the Talmud, you have to understand you cannot read it alone. It's 63 volumes. It's huge. It's commentary. A lot of people think of it as comedy, as it's thought of in many, many, many different contexts. But my way of thinking is that this is a meta layer of a code base, and that the Talmud has to be used to read the Jewish Bible, and that this is why in the Talmud they are so against. It was really funny because there were a lot of people in 325 AD that told Constantine, "Oh my God, you stupid fucking emperor!" They didn't say it that way. Don't join the Jewish Old Covenant with the New Testament. Don't do it. They're not related. Blah 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 blah. They did it anyway, right? So the Bible is created as this combined work that basically includes the Torah with the New Testament. But it's really funny is that there were a lot of these people that were on the Jewish side saying, or on the Talmudic side, not the Jewish side, but on the Talmudic side saying, don't do it. But it was necessary that it be done, and Constantine, unlike Justinian later on, well, I won't go into that, but Constantine was maneuvered into doing this by Khazarians in his cabinet structure, because they had been infiltrating for years and years and years. As I say, for at least 6,000 years, they've been, the people that have been involved with all of this Khazarian stuff have been involved in this deep death cult that I frame as space alien influence, right? Anyway, though, so we have here the Talmud as a meta layer that is floating above, and you read the text of the Jewish Bible through the lens of the Talmud to understand this other massive layer of knowledge that can be gained from doing so. Now, this is not something most people are going to want to do for lots of reasons, because it gets you into some really seriously dark shit. But it gets even worse than that, or it is even more magnified than that, because there's this thing called the Zohar, and it is part of the Jewish Kabbalists, okay? And this is from where we get the Cabal, right? But the Kabbalists are, they're like, so the Zohar has to be used as a lens to move and magnify and cite, as in terms of position effectively, the Talmud, so that you can read the underlying stuff with an understanding. So for instance, in the Zohar, as well as in the Talmud, if you know how to look at it, seeing it through the lens of the Zohar, they're talking entirely about space aliens. The Zohar entirely talks about the Elohim, which is the plural of the people that came down from the sky. And when the people that came down from the sky showed up in their spaceships, which were called Roch, which is the Hebrew word that we translate as Holy Spirit, that was translated as Holy Spirit by the King James Bible fuckery. When you translate that word, it means spaceship. It means spaceship that will float over water, because they had another kind of spaceship that floated over land but didn't float over water. So there was that distinction there, and you notice how water has to be understood. The references in the Bible to it, the multiplicity, the actual numeracy of the Bible. Every time that a certain phrase is repeated and so on, there are meanings that can be extracted through the Talmud back up into the Zohar. The Zohar does not discuss God as Christians and everybody would understand it. This understanding is a lens discussing what happened to humanity when these fuckers, the Elohim, showed up. Individually, they were an Eloha, okay? And we see variants of the word Eloha in aloha and all of these other words all throughout the planet that mean different things, but we have the same phenomes and the same connection or thread to a greeting. Hello, right, is even a variant of that. Because you were supposed to do specific greetings, and the Zohar tells you about that. You can't just go and talk to these Elohim if you see them out on the road. You get shit. These are so it's very much like basically non-structured clothing, carrying a wooden spear, a Native American having to approach a conquistador, right? You had to do that shit with respect, because these guys could reach out 4 or 5 feet with their steel sword and slice your head off. And as you stuck your wooden spear towards them, they could break that with their steel swords, right? So you had to deal with these people in a specific way. You couldn't walk on up to them and say, "Hey, Joe, what's happening?" Right? Same thing with the Eloha, or Elohim. And so when you approached an Eloha, you had to have this respectful greeting and all of this kind of shit, all of which can be seen if you view all of these books with this proper perspective. And so we have many different source codes here, because it was determined by the Khazarian Mafia that they could benefit by extracting understanding from our from these lower layers and keeping that understanding to themselves, because it was very powerful to have these understandings. Not going to go into this. Tons of shit you have to understand here, and we just don't have time for me to spend 8 hours talking about this particular aspect of history and all of the variants on it. You've got to go and do a lot of your own research. Go to Veterans Today, by the way, and read the story on the Khazarian Mafia. Read the article on it. It has a lot of good, interesting information, but it has it's missing, of course, vast quantities. You can read about the name stealers if you look for them in that language. You can read about them in the Codex Oralinda. You can read about them in Chinese literature. They're talked about in Siberian and Russian literature. So the name stealers is a clue, right? And so we see these clues about all of this through our own source code that tells us how to watch out for these things. But part of our Khazarian Mafia here has been to destroy the culture through which that source code is promulgated generation after generation after generation. If the Khazarian Mafia come along and say, "Oh, you can't criticize Semitic people, and we're a Semitic people, and this is anti-Semitism, and you can't use those words," hey, it busts up your ability to transmit from one generation to another that the name stealers, the Khazarians, are not Semites. They're not Semitic people. So you can say all the fuck you want about Khazarian Jews, because they're not Semites. They're not of the house of Judah. They're not born or descendant from Shem. So, you have to understand the language and all of that. So this is the info wars. You're in an info war Budo. We'll do these as we go forward, as these various aspects of the war present themselves. What you need to know now is that everything you see is not as being portrayed in the West. So Putin is not invading the Ukraine. This is an incursion. It's not a skirmish. It is an incursion. They're going after the biolabs. Soon, Xi will go after the biolabs over here in Taiwan. And here's Taipei, little tiny place over here. And so they will attack, and they will take the biolabs out in Taipei, because that's where they located them. The Khazarian Mafia is very, very, very sneaky. So they put all these biolabs and stuff in civilian areas, which is perfect for releasing it later, just like they did with COVID-19. Russia knows that they released COVID-19. Xi knows they released COVID-19. The CCP cooperated with him. He has his own deep state issues. They've got to get the biolabs out of Taipei there, so they're going to have civilian issues there. The Taiwanese need to be doing just what the smart Ukrainians are doing and stand the fuck down. These people are not coming to take your territory. They're coming to protect themselves from the Khazarians' next plan, like Bill Gates said, which is to fuck them over with weaponized smallpox that's genetically keyed. I'll go into why I don't think that that's feasible and why their COVID-19 thing was more of a scam than a real disease. The spike protein is a terrible weapon if it's aerosolized and you get it, you're fucked. And I know people that are battling that part of it now, but it's the disease part, the transmission from human to human. If they're not injecting it in you, it doesn't transmit. The coronavirus dies easily against vitamin D, et cetera, as we proved. Anyway, I won't go into all of that now. But these guys truly think that they can have a weaponized smallpox that's genetically keyed that will be more effective in penetrating your stuff here, your cells, and killing you than natural smallpox, and they've been trying to engineer it. So there's all these biolabs around the planet, and so they're being taken out as part of this global overthrow of the Khazarian Mafia, what we call the globalists. Okay, this group that has infiltrated the Jews, the Jewish population, and has always used them as a cover, as a sacrificial cover. They are the Judas goat in the sense that they are the Khazarian mafia, right? They surround themselves with sheep such that the sheep get killed and they get to escape. And so this is not about the Jews. The Jews are put there. The Khazarian mafia has designed a mindset to make people hate Jews. I kid you not. All of the crimes of the Khazarian mafia, from the days of the blood sucking from which we get the vampires, okay, because they were trying to do this adrenochrome shit because of what the Elohim had told them. You've got to read it through the Zohar, read that through into the Talmud, read that through into the Torah, and you will see that they're talking about adrenochrome in the days. I know it dates through in the 1800s, pre-revolution back in Kansk, in this area in Russia here, in central Russia, and they were going to claim, the Khazarians were going to claim, try and have Russia give them this area here and let the Jews take it over later as part, anyway, but it was a central point. There was a big Jewish population, but it was an infiltrated Jewish population that had the Khazarians, the name stealers, inculcated, and these people then, in the 1800s, went around and took blood. And it set up this whole thing about vampirism and all of this kind of stuff, associating it in early 1800, may have even been earlier, might have been in the 1700s, that it actually really began, and then it became inculcated in the 1800s, to the point that there was this legend about blood-sucking Jews. Now, ultimately, they converted that idea over to the idea that these people were avaricious and blood was translated over to currency. So there's all of this language fuckery that goes on with these people, with the name stealers. Okay, but let me tell you that the Jewish population is not, as I say, they're there as a sacrifice. They're there for you to hate so that you don't ever get at the Khazarian mafia that's infiltrated them, that has taken them over the way they've taken over the Biden White House and all of that kind of shit, right? So this is why if you send me emails and stuff and you're hating on Jews, you can just go fuck yourself. You can just go fuck yourself. You're wasting my time. In fact, I have filters on my email because I can code. I know source code, and so I write source code that looks for these words, and I never even see your emails. So if you've got words in there that are anti-Jewish, I'll never see it. It'll kick you right on out. So anyway, let me get on with this. I got to go and get stuff done here. So here's where we're at now. Putin's going to take out the 11 or 13, I think. There's 13 biolabs in here that have been paid for by our big pharma, by DOD, and all of this. This is great because this is going to just rape them of vast quantities of money as these things are destroyed. Then Putin's going to go away. He's going to leave the Ukraine. They're going to have a nice talk with Ukraine. They're going to talk about Zelensky and what needs to be done with him and all of his ilk, and they're just going to go away. This will take a long time. We're going to have a similar situation that will occur in Taiwan, okay, with Xi. Now, this is going to be just the knife in the guts there for the globalists, for the Khazarian mafia, especially here in the West. Because what the fuck are they going to do? They're saying that they're standing with the Ukrainians against the evil Russians. Are they going to stand with the Taiwanese against the evil Chinese? Especially when Biden is owned, when he has a big goddamn stick up his butt? Now also, look how Xi doesn't have any fucking thing to do with Biden. So there's alignments going on here. In order to see the war effectively, in order to see this info war, now the developing kinetic war, which is not ever going to be nuclear, it's not ever going to be World War III. It is World War III or IV, whatever number you want to put on it. It is a global war, but it is against the global infiltration of all the governments by the Khazarians. And guess who else is a Khazarian? Hey, Klaus Schwab, the Rothschilds, the Bauer family, who are claimed Jewish. I don't think of them as Jewish at all. I think of them as satanic. And so, as Khazarians. So we have to get our language accurate here, right? Khazarians are down in Australia, they're in New Zealand, they're in Britain, they're every fucking place. Well, they're mostly not in Africa. There's not a lot of them in Africa. There's reasons for that, and we can go into it later on. So the Khazarians are really a goofy bunch, and they're evil, probably the most evil thing on the planet. very profane. So I have no issues in saying they're real fuckers and speaking of them in very profane terms, because they are instruments of profanity on this planet at the deepest possible level. And it's their time. So this is a glorious time to be alive. This is Armageddon, all right, in the Christian sense. Not Amigidio, or however it's pronounced, as a place name in the greater area of Judea, okay, not as that ancient battle in which these people held this against a tremendous siege of both Romans and Israelites. We're not speaking of it that way. We're speaking of Armageddon in the sense of the great revealing. This is the opening up of all of the secrets. This is the apocalypse. It is our revelation. We're living in the times of revelation. And we're going to see all of this shit revealed. This is secrets revealed on a massive level. So now, getting back to a certain amount of practicality here. Martin Armstrong has a computer that he calls Socrates. Now, he never discusses his software or any of that. He calls it his computer. I can understand that, but I don't think of these things as the machine. I think of it as the software, the processes, the algorithms, and so on. But in any event, though, so he says his computer is saying that we're into the world war cycle and we've got to be real careful. I agree, we've got to be real careful. Shit can go wonky really bad. If, for instance, the Khazarians were actually in charge here in the United States, they could push a button and nuke Russia, and all this would be good for them, because then the Great Reset would happen, and so all of that, and they would have the cover of this world war, because they're demonizing Russia as the great evil. Now, they've got a real problem, because so many of the people in the United States now are anti-Biden, that we're awake, we understand, that we're telling others, Putin's not a bad guy, this is what's going on. It's they paid for all these biolabs right there to engineer a Slavic specific form, and these are the Slavic people, the Russo-Slavic Finn peoples, to engineer a form of smallpox that would kill them all off. And so they're just protecting themselves, just as the Chinese are protecting themselves against the biolabs in Taiwan. And so we're telling people this. We're getting the word out that what you see on that fucking news is a cover for these bastards here. And no, they're not damn Jews. They're Satanists, okay? They are truly evil motherfuckers pretending to be Jews. And I get really pissed about that, name stealing. Anyway, guys, so this is where we're at with the war. Martin Armstrong says we're going to go into World War III. I think we are in the war, whatever number you want to put on it. It is global. It'll go on for a long time, but it won't be like any other war you've ever seen, because it's not going to be nation state versus nation state. And we're not having nation state versus nation state now with the incursion of the Russian forces into the Ukraine cesspit. This war is going to go on for 18 years. It'll peak over the course of 23, 24, and 25. But it's not going to be throwing nukes at each other. It's not that kind of war. This is going to be an entirely different sort of thing. We're going to have a huge burst of information come on out over this next year that is going to just be vastly altering of the information landscape. And then we'll have much more come out in 23, 24, and 25 that will be the details that will backfill all of the stuff we're going to be given this year. And so over these next few years, we will dive head first into this new information war as we rebuild humanity and planet Earth. And so I'm here to say that I've got nothing in any of my data that says we got nukes flying around or any of that. I know the deeper levels of what's going on because I read code. I can code. In fact, I'm doing code now. Getting into Lisp in a serious way. That's why the parentheses around the source code. But because I can go deep in the source code, I'm not worried about that aspect of it. I am very worried about people dying in this war as civilians from lack of electricity, lack of food, lack of medicine, lack of transportation, lack of water, and so on, right? And so there's something to note. We don't have people in the Ukraine right now dying from lack of electricity. That attack on the nuke plant was nowhere near the actual operational nuke plant. It was at the administrative building where the Khazarian mafia had put their fucking tanks that were shelling the Russian tanks. Okay, so they wanted it to look like the Russians are the bad guys in doing this stuff. So they're going to set up all of these false flag kind of episodes to try and sucker the Russians into this. Putin's smarter than that, and he's just going to keep out hammering that information. And there's people like myself out here that are hammering out this information continuously. Even though I've got a lot of stuff to do, and it's very terrible times for us. We're in grief, all of that kind of stuff, bereavement. We have to get this information out because we're in war, and it is necessary that people understand and not freak out about this, and they get on the right side of the alignment here, right? And so, in my way of thinking, Putin's a righteous dude, and he's a judoka, and he walks his talk. Just like Trump, he walks his talk, okay? Nothing duplicitous, nothing false or phony about either of these individuals. So we'll see about Xi. If they go on in and then withdraw, hey, stand up dude, you know. And he's apparently been name, the reverse of name stealing, you know. His name had been corrupted by the Khazarians in China. And here's something else to know, right? The Khazarians took over the Russian Revolution as the Bolsheviks, and it became communism. The Khazarians instituted Mao's revolution and supported Mao and paid for Mao's revolution that took over China. So anyway, that's it. That's it for the dojo. Clean up the mats as you leave. Somebody's got to sweep and do the air freshening. A lot of us have been sweating in here. Turn on the fans, get the heat set up, and we'll see you when we next see you.